we want to talk about storytelling and Africa and how do we tell these stories. There is a word called griot. And many people are not, I don't know, many people may not be acquainted with that word, but it's an oral tradition where stories are passed on, where you have griots in the communities and they share the stories of what happened, and that's a form of storytelling. And so I'm here this evening with Ernestine, the first Black curator at the Brooklyn Museum. A round of applause. Not only is she Black, she's also African from Cape Town, from South Africa. And so we started this Africa fashion was exhibited at the V&A Museum. And I want to commend the curator there, Dr. Christine Chenchiska. And they came up with something incredible as part of the storytelling. And now we have it at the Brooklyn Museum, improved, revised. Ernestine, you want to take us through the exhibition and take us through what it means for Africa fashion to be at the Brooklyn Museum?
Thank you so much for that. As the co-curator for the exhibition, my other half is somewhere here, Anissa Melvasin. And, for both her and I, firstly, it was personal. So when it is personal, you really start to question and, engage with what does it mean to be an African within the 21st century? How are our stories as creatives being engaged with within spaces on the continent, as well as spaces outside of the continent? And so Africa Fashion, an exhibition, as you indicated, is coming from the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. It was an ideal space, this space called New York, this space called Brooklyn, where the African and diaspora communities are as diverse, the most diverse within New York. And so to create an opportunity for those whose histories and narratives are being reflected in a space that for many don't feel welcome. Most museums, most encyclopedic museums, if you don't know, most of them don't really give you the feeling of being welcomed. Your stories are being narrated by others in ways that are not necessarily reflective of your own lived realities and histories. And so when we had an opportunity to look at those conversations and really engage with how do we tell stories that really give an understanding of the appreciation of the rich cultural histories that we have, but also give an understanding that those histories, I'm saying histories as if they're in the past, the contemporary creatives continue to be inspired and mining those histories to create new conversations around notions of senses of self and identity. So for myself and Anissa, it was really a no-brainer to have Africa Fashion come to Brooklyn Museum, come to New York, come to North America, to create an opportunity for us to engage with how do we, as Africans, and those from the diaspora, really find ways to appreciate ourselves and each other.
Excellent, excellent. Going through the exhibition, you find that the storytelling involves politics. It involves music. It involves books. It involves theater. And so for me, it looked like the storytelling was in different bits of expressions. Politics and how the 54, well, not all 54 countries went through independence and all that. What were you trying to achieve by those different forms of expressions?
So the narrative, the journey that we wanted to take you on was first this understanding that the notion of emancipation, what does it mean when you are free to be yourself? So through that journey of understanding, just for a moment, the histories, the process that each and every one of the 54 countries took to obtain independence, what that looked like, what that felt like, and how creatives really looked inward to understanding and expressing those notions of freedom in really nuanced ways. So one of the ways that we really started to engage with that was through first acknowledging that history, visually showcasing that as the image indicates there, then using music as also another way to ground you in moments. Some of you might know Mary Makeba's Pata Pata. Some of you might remember Fela Anikulapo Kuti's Zombie album. And there are songs that remind you of moments in history. And so that was an important component to really giving you a holistic expression of how we found ourselves in certain moments in time. Then there was also an opportunity to shed light on some of the textile histories, look inward, as Omoyemi was really speaking about these crafts communities and the significance of those craftsmen, those histories of textiles being the DNA of who we are. And using that DNA to kind of create another way of looking and appreciating who we are as Africans within our own respective countries. So we created an opportunity to shed light on some of these rich textile histories. Then there was an opportunity to find ways for contemporary creatives to touch on, bring back the kente that we think of is in the past, but Studio 189, a Ghana-based, US-based creative brand, bringing what we think of as traditional back into the contemporary space and making it fashionable, not just for the African market, but for the global markets. Then we also had an opportunity to find ways for you to get to know some of what we refer to as the vanguard, some of the early fashion designers of the time. So our Sade Thomas Fons, our Chris Seydous, our Alfadis, our Kofi Ansars, all these creatives, again, reminding us that they looked to their own cultural and textile traditions and then created a new way of imagining the sense of self. And what was most important also is to create then a space for you to experience how all those histories then culminate into a center space that is referred to as the cutting edge, where truly through different themes of artisanal practice, creatives engaging with these crafts communities, through a way of looking at senses of self, whether it's through a process called minimalism, the paring down of colors, the cut and draping of a costume, or the expression of adornment, where it's not just you're wearing an earring because it's pretty, but that earring or that necklace is the center of attention. And how do we all use these natural modes of self-expression that our aunties, our grandmothers have shown us in time memorial, and really see how that these traditions are coming back. And then using music again within the final center space as a contemporary understanding that although we are hearing the Amapianos and the Afro beats on the continent, our Tiwa Savage, Burna Boy, all these creatives are also being celebrated and appreciated outside of the continent. And so as a whole, it's really trying to understand that African creativity, although grounded on the continent, has always been part of the global conversation and the global experience. And so how do we find ways to acknowledge the contribution that Africa has always had to the rest of the world?
Talking about the contribution, do you think that contribution, does the rest of the world, do they acknowledge that contribution, or the other continents, the contribution we are making, or are we just making noise? And then do you think, or what's the impact of this?
Well, I think the most obvious art form is music. And that has really taken leaps and bounds in terms of individuals really appreciating African music. You can have someone in Poland who knows who Burna Boy is, And so this opportunity, again, for cross-pollination of ideas, inspiration, music genres, flipping the way in which we kind of see each other. And I think creativity has that opportunity, unlike any other art form, for you to really find ways to connect with someone who's completely different from you. You might not know what they're saying in a song, but there's something that of the words or the lyrics or the tune that really connects, allows you to connect with someone else. And so for me, this idea of creativity being an expansive way of understanding a culture is really what we need to see and appreciate. That as artists, whether you are a visual artist, whether you are a fashion designer or a filmmaker, your voice is necessary, your voice is valued, but it requires that the creatives on the ground also are capacitated to understand how do you, from your craft, from your talent, create something that is sustainable. Yeah.
Thank you very much. But what were the challenges? I know for a fact that even with the V&A museum, they were looking for sponsors. So an institution like V&A, with all this, their backers, with African fashion, they were looking for sponsors. And at some point, we got involved to, try to facilitate, and we did eventually get a sponsor. So how do we find, at the end of the day, as the DSG said yesterday, the pocket is important. So how do we find institutions, or how do we get support for African fashion, the creative sector? I mean, the music seems to, how do we, for African art, how do we find support? What would your plea be if there's some institutional investors here? What would you say to them?
Well, in the past few days, I've been listening to, how people have, I've been listening, 25 billion here, 10 billion here, and there's a full understanding that these economies are generating money, large amounts of money, which is enriching a particular percentage of our community that is African. We're not talking about, let's talk about Africans. There are billionaires on the African continent. There are politicians who have the capacity to really move forward the resources that are needed to develop the ecosystem that's conducive to the growth of our creative economies. So it's really about trying to have those individuals understand the value of their own histories, the value of their own cultural currencies. But also, in addition to that, it's also about giving people a tangible understanding that, okay, if I'm an artist, I'm making a painting. From the painting, how is that painting going to sustain me in order to bring food on the table? But also, how am I able to express or continue to express myself in a way that gives others an appreciation of my talent? So for me, I'd really say that it's a three-pronged approach. You have your private sector, you have your government, and you also have the creatives who have to work in tandem with each other to really understand how do we get to give the kind of resources and support needed for creatives.
So I think that the creatives as well need to find ways to pitch this product to investors, because it's not the straight line kind of investment. Because at the end of the day, they want to, beyond a heritage, history, they want returns. So how do we structure this artistic expression or storytelling in such a way that the investors, cannot be the traditional modes of investing, but that the investors see the return on their investments?
It all depends on the sector that we're talking about. Because when we're saying creativity, there's so many. There's music, there's film, there's visual art, there's fashion. So, when I'm speaking from a perspective of a visual artist, what we also have to understand, for example, when we're talking about investment, I don't know if you've ever been in a space where artwork is being auctioned or sold or bought. The demographic of people is a particular way. And the artwork that is being bought and sold is of our cultural expressions. The amount of money, the obscene amounts of money that are being transferred in those rooms is shocking. But what is equally shocking is that although the money is being transferred, there is no section of that transference that goes back to the creative who made the work, where these large amounts of money are being shared. And so, as someone who has wealth, your responsibility first is to buy local. So instead of buying a Picasso, buy an Ojikere. Buy an Ernest Mangoba, buy a Trevor Stearman, because as you are buying within, I'm not saying just your own country, on the continent, because the creativity is vast, you are also contributing to an ecosystem where, because now an artist is being given a fair amount for his or her work, they're able to then feed their family and feed their passion and craft to create more work. And also that work generates other secondary ways and other communities that also profit or contribute to that success of the creative. So it's really about understanding that investment is, yes, if you have the money. In South Africa, we say local is lekker, meaning buy local.
Super.
Then what you also need to do is within the private sector, within government, government's responsibility is to find ways to create a system that is conducive to creativity. So for example, in South Africa, sorry South Africa, we don't have electricity. We don't have water. So if a creative needs to make in order to survive, how are they going to do it in the dark? How are they going to, if they need a machine to make that garment, a sewing machine, how are they going to do it? So the responsibility is also on government to create the setting that is conducive to creating the creativity that we want to have. So there's so many levels to it. So I know I'm expanding on it, but it really is, investment is investing in your own cultural histories and currency.
I think
and then government also investing in creating the infrastructure that is conducive.
Super. A round of applause for Ernestine. I also want to acknowledge Anissa.
Where are you, Anissa?
Well
Stand
done.
up, please.
Well.
That's the other half.
And so, as we said yesterday, Africa is unstoppable because of you. And we can't stop storytelling, we can't stop sharing our stories through the different modes of expression.